Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Shadeed Muhammad. Welcome to the Mardiyah Show, where we are meeting Muslims where they are. My topic for today is the phenomenon of stress and anxiety amongst many of the young Muslims, which in some instances have led to many young Muslims contemplating suicide. I myself have counseled a few Muslims within the past 6 months who have contemplated suicide. And you would think that Muslims who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last day, understand the qadr, the divine decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that these would not be issues for us as Muslims. But we're human beings and we succumb to the things that human beings succumb to. However, inshallah ta'ala, we want to discuss here tonight some of the remedies for these issues that cause stress, that lead to despair, that lead to a person considering suicide. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. That those who say Allah is my Lord and then afterwards are upright, that the angels descend upon them, giving them glad tidings, saying receive glad tidings, ولا تحزنوا, and don't grieve. Don't grieve. Don't have grief. There's other verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْمُتَّقِينَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. That indeed Allah is with those, don't grieve. Don't grieve. There, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with those who are patient. Those are with those who are, pious. So there are many verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with the issue of grief. And as the scholars mentioned, that grief is something that happens to you because of something fataka, something that passed you by, that you can't get over. And which is anxiety, is something that you fear in the future. Could be irrational fear about something, whether it's a debt, whether it's, your grades if you're in college, marriage. These are all things that create anxiety. And ultimately, both of these things, stress and anxiety, they lead to what is called despair. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that despair is not characteristic of the believer. The believer never falls into despair. So with these things being the case, inshallah ta'ala, I have two of my guests here with me today that are going to elaborate on this particular topic. One will come from, inshallah ta'ala, a more clinical, psychological standpoint, and including deen, because, Dr. Brock can hold his own, even religiously. And another scholar of ours, inshallah ta'ala, is going to tackle the subject from a religious standpoint. And how do we deal with stress and anxiety? I have with me today Imam Abu Usamah Adh-Dhahabi, and I have with me Dr. Raymond Brock Murry. Welcome, my guests. Jazakumullahu khairan for coming on the show. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. So I want to kind of jump right into this. Starting with you, Dr. Brock, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll try to keep the answers very short and to the point. What are some of the causes of stress and anxiety? I mean, you're a professor, you work in a university, so you work with young Muslims. And I'm sure that you've encountered this, on many of occasions. What are some of the main causes, if you can list 3 or 4, for stress and anxiety amongst young people?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So alhamdulillah, speaking specifically about the Muslims, the first thing I would say is that there is nothing really different that the Muslims are going through from what the non-Muslims are going through. I think in particular, as it relates to the Muslims, is that what leaves us at a disadvantage is our difficulty connecting what we're going through to Islam, meaning understanding Allah's purpose behind whatever hardship that He has decreed in our lives. Because we do struggle with, poverty in our homes, conflict in the household, not being sure what direction to take in your life, feeling lonely. You know, a lot of young Muslims don't have partners, they're not married, and feel like nobody's interested in them. And so it can come from any different number of things. But really, a lot of it is really not being connected to Allah in the sense that there's a context for what you're struggling through. What makes it the worst for the Muslims is that they seem to be just struggling just for the sake of struggling. You know what I'm saying?
Elaborate on that. What do you mean by that?
And so, alhamdulillah, when you think about it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that He's going to test us, right? And that all of these tests and all of our hardships are really, really to determine for Him who of us is best in our religion, who of us is best in our deeds. But when we struggle, when we're suffering through a particular issue, all you're focused on is what you're going through. Mm-hmm. And you're not focused on it thinking about, how do I want to try to pass this test, or what resources has Allah placed in my life to be able to get through this issue. You know, subhanAllah, a lot of Muslims will be just struggling with something, you know, I'm failing in school, and that leads them to make a lot of conclusions about themselves that don't reflect belief in Allah, because it's really, you know, I'm not trying to make this a religious issue where you say anybody who's suffering doesn't believe in Allah, right? But a lot of times what you find in the Muslims is that we believe in Allah, but we don't have faith in Allah.
What?
And,
Explain.
And those are two different things. Mm-hmm. You look, you know, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He even says this in the Qur'an, right? Like, you know, is if you ask the non-Muslims, that they would say that who created the heavens and earth? Allah did, right? When you ask them to worship Allah, it's very different. Mm-hmm. And so this is the same thing. We all believe in Allah, right? But you ask the Muslims, we believe in Allah, but then you say, I'm never going to get married, I'm never going to this, I'm never going to that. Allah is not happy with me, He'll never forgive me. These are reflections of not having faith.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? And so, alhamdulillah, that is what is different for the Muslims in terms of anxiety. We all lose our homes, we all lose our jobs, but then sometimes we feel like Allah has abandoned us and won't help us, or we don't turn to each other. That is what is unique for the Muslim situation.
Jazakallah khair. Sheikh Abu Usamah, Dr. Brock mentioned that the Muslims struggle to make the connection between what it is they're going through in their personal lives and connecting that to their religion. So there's a disconnect there. What do you think is some of the reasons that the young Muslims are not able to make that connection? Like, I'm going through this because of X, Y, Z, or maybe Allah is testing me with this. Like, why aren't we able to make the connection between what we're being tested with and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
I believe and I think that a lot of times, the more knowledge a person has about any given situation, the better he is equipped to deal with that particular problem or challenge. And that's why Allah Ta'ala puts forth the rhetorical question in the Qur'an, هل يستوي الذين يعلمون الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون? Are they equal, those who know and those who don't know?
Hold the mic up closer to your mouth.
Are they equal, those who know and those who don't know? So those people who know, whether it is the youngster, he's been educated, he's been informed, he's been developed, he's been groomed in a way to understand problems are part and parcel what it is to be a human being. That's the religion talking to him. You're going to be tried on a daily basis, on a constant basis, and you can't get away from that. So the one who knows that if he's going to be tried, he has to put it in perspective. The trial that I've been given, I have the ability to deal with it, or it would not come to me. He has knowledge that Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Allah is Al-Latif. Allah has names and characteristics that make it impossible for him to oppress you. He's able, he knows. He has to put it in perspective. Whatever he's going through, whatever she's dealing with, there's someone who has it far more serious and difficult than they do. He looks at the situation and he says, this thing that I'm going through right now, he's been taught, he came to know one way or another. This problem is a kafara for me. This thing is cleaning me up, provided I deal with it. It's going to clean me up if I stay the course. He's been taught that. He puts it into perspective and he says, every single difficulty that Allah sent down, behind that difficulty, the ease is coming. Allah does not send a difficulty down except that the ease is going to come after it. So I think it's an issue of knowledge, being informed. And it doesn't just necessarily mean religious knowledge, which is, of course, the most important issue, but it's also just having the support of people who are informing that individual that he can't look at those issues or the things that are confronting him through the eye of a person who's negative. Because negativity is against what the Prophet was upon. He used to, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ask the man who would come, where you from? The man would say to him, I'm from the land, it's a dust bowl. Where I come from is a dust bowl. The Prophet would say, no, your land is the land of Khadira. It's going to be a green place. And that was his way of being optimistic. Hey, where do you come from? The man would say, Ya Rasulullah, I come from the place that's called Shibub Balala. I come from the valley of misguidance. That's what they called it. He said, no, your valley is called the valley of guidance. Be positive, be optimistic and positive. A lady came and said, what's your name? The lady said, my name is Asiya. I'm the disobedient one. That's what my parents named me. He said, no, your name is Jamila. Your name is Jamila.
MashaAllah.
So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us to understand. The parents teach the child. The child who learns his religion, he knows negativity is a weapon of shaitan. And thinking positive is the first step towards tackling the problem. And there are many other things that a person can think about.
Let me itemize those things. Let me go back, because you said, you listed about 6 or 7 things here.
And there are more.
And number one is that to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to test you with more than what you can handle. So any test that you're going through, Allah knew that you could handle it before He tested you with it. All right? Sometimes those tests show you how much you don't know about yourself. Because obviously if Allah tested you with it, He knew that you could handle it. You just didn't know that yourself. Number 2 is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has names, attributes that show you that no matter what the test you're going through, that it is still a mercy for you. Allah is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Latif. He's subtle, he's gentle, He's merciful, He's compassionate. And even as you go through these trials and tribulation, these are the things that you should be reminding yourself of. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the possessor of these beautiful names and attributes, would never oppress you. He would never, don't look at your trial or your tribulation as oppression. Number 3,
Someone has it more difficult.
looking at the Prophet ﷺ told us to always look at the hand that is lower than to look at the hand that is upper. That there's always someone that has it worse than you. That no matter what you think you're going through, there's always someone that has it worse than you have it. And, another one is, keep yourself surrounded by positive people. People that, appeal to your optimism, your ability to be optimistic, because that is where despair comes from. Despair comes from you losing your ability to be optimistic about things. You no longer see the glass half full. You see it as half empty, right? And he mentioned a number of examples. So, mashallah, tabarakallah, that was excellent. That was excellent. I want to go into, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry. So I've been listening very intently, and I just want to take maybe 15 seconds to say something.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. The only thing that can destroy us is time.
It's so, and Allah says He is time.
Right.
Alhamdulillah. And listen, all of these things are good that we're saying, right? But it doesn't matter. And I just want to be very, very clear about that. I think that we talk about a lot of these things, and it can be very, very difficult. I mean, people hear it and they love it and they appreciate it, but when they go home, they're not able to really hold on to it, and it doesn't connect with them. And I think that's important to say here, because if we really want to benefit, inshallah, we really have to look at, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that He made the seat of our knowledge our hearts. Mm-hmm. And so what we're talking about now is more intellectual things, right? Like we look at things intellectually, but I just want to put this out there to the audience and to remind myself and all of us is that really you need to be approaching these things emotionally, because it's not your intellect that you run from when you're scared, it's your emotions, right? It's not your intellect that you, alhamdulillah.
Steve, say that again. Say that again, man.
No, it's the truth though, because look, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that Allah, he doesn't hesitate in anything except in taking our souls. And he hesitates in taking our souls because we hate to die, right? Because we hate to die. He knows that we hate to die. And so I look at that when, alhamdulillah, in my training, one thing that I think about a lot is this concept of destruction, right? Is that everybody is afraid of being destroyed. I'm afraid for my reputation to be destroyed. I'm afraid for my money to be destroyed, my family to be destroyed. I'm afraid for my idea of myself to be destroyed. Am I no longer the man or woman who I thought I was? And that's fear. That's anxiety, right?
Wow.
When we think about it. And so that's emotional. And so a lot of people, when I look at the disconnect that the Muslims seem to be dealing with, is because intellectually, I have a brother who comes in and talks to me every week. And I've said it, Allah doesn't test you with more than you can bear. And he says, I've heard that, but I don't believe it. Because look, you have a box. Anybody have a box? You can set up an idea, you can have a game plan going into a boxing match. But it's hard to hold on to that when the other guy punches you in the face. You know what I'm saying?
When you feel the power, the impact that just
you're like,
knocks
what's that
everything
supposed
out
to
of
do?
you.
Right, and so I'm saying this, alhamdulillah, because, we talk about these things and we're all strong and we hear it. But, if you're not really practicing this on a daily basis in your life when you're okay, it's going to be really hard to do when you're not okay. And so this is when we really, really get tested in our iman, because it's in those moments when we start to think about Allah doesn't test us with more than we can handle. That's after some tragedy has befallen us and we haven't really practiced it. And I like to say, why do we do fire drills? Right? So that when the fire eventually comes, we know what to do. And so all these things that we're talking about now, of course we can do them intellectually, but you actually want to start doing this stuff emotionally now.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question, and that is, how is it that a Muslim who believes in Allah and the last day, parents Muslim, the adhan was called in his ear, the date was rubbed on his gums, he was given a Muslim name like Muhammad or Abdullah or Amatullah, Aisha, Fatima, Khadija, and turn around at some point in their lives and decide, I want to kill myself? How is that even possible? From a Muslim standpoint, you can look and say, how could a Muslim even consider suicide, knowing that it is haram in our religion and knowing the punishments that are associated with those who commit suicide?
I mean, a lot can be said, but I would have to put this forward that I totally disagree that there is a distinction and separation between intellectual and spiritual. Because the dua of ham wa gham,
Hold the mic up a little more.
the dua of anxiety that the Prophet said, anyone who makes this dua, it will take his anxiety away. Has nothing to do with being intellectual. Has everything to do with iman and believing in what came out of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there is an aspect of intellectualism in there, and that the person understands what's being said. But to go to this point of how does a person come to this situation where they contemplate suicide? It's part of the human experience, and that's why the Prophet addressed it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah mentioned in the Quran, وَمَا فَرَّطْنَا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. We didn't leave anything out of this book, this Quran, this religion. Nothing, no thing. وَنَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. This book explains everything that you need to know. So he addressed and he warned people, if you kill yourself, then the reward is this and the reward is that. The punishment is this and punishment is that. So it goes to show it's part of the human experience. And some people during his time murdered themselves. The two people that the Prophet didn't pray janazah upon, only two, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Didn't pray janazah on a man who owed a debt, and he didn't pray janazah on a man who committed suicide, to show the community this is a serious thing. He told the people, لا يتمنن أحدكم الموت لمصيبة أصيب بها. No one should desire to die because of a catastrophe that hit him. He said, ولكن إذا كان لابد. But if you have to pray for death, he said, then you should say, oh Allah, if living is better for me, then cause me to live. But if dying is better for me, then cause me to die. But he prohibits us, don't make that dua. But a person can see some situations in his life that will cause some serious duress. The waliyatu of Allah, she's from the awliya of Allah in the Qur'an, one of the 4 complete women in the world. How is it possible that someone can wish for death? One of the 4 greatest women, complete women, Maryam bintu Imran, when she fell pregnant from a mu'jiza with Imam, she said, well, I wish I was dead before this would happen. I wish I was dead before I come before my people, knowing the nature of her people. I wish I was dead, because I can't tolerate. It is a big musibah for me to be accused of committing zina. But that didn't mean she wanted to commit suicide, but it was something that was heavy on her. So it's possible, and this is why I think it is really important that we're not judgmental towards people who speak like that. We have to support them. We have to try to understand.
Good point.
We have to
Excellent
try
point.
to understand where are they coming from, because it is possible, like this situation in Iraq right now, in Gaza, Ramallah. I don't think, Allahu Alam, I think it's very difficult to be a father to see a building fall on my child. Allah forbid. So these things take place, and they take place with the hikmah of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and it's something that is possible. I think one of the worst things that we can do is to be judgmental. And also, I told you that the Prophet didn't pray on the man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who killed himself. But I don't think we should practice that sunnah during this time. Because we're in a time and a place, we're at a time and a place where that probably isn't the wisest thing to do right now. But instead, we should take other measures, inshallah, to address this issue. And Allah is a'la and a'lam.
That's a good point. So during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were individuals who contemplated suicide, and there were companions that did commit suicide. As we're all familiar of the hadith of the man who the Prophet ﷺ, when the Sahaba saw him fighting on the battlefield, they said, "Innahu min ahl al-jannah." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Bal huwa min ahl al-nar." No, he's from the people of the hellfire. And the Sahaba were conflicted because they're saying, "Look at him fight. Look at him out on the battlefield. How could you say he's from the people of the hellfire?" And so one of the Sahaba said, I wanted to follow him. So the man went behind a boulder. He had a wound that he couldn't be patient with, and he put the butt of his sword in the dirt, and he laid down on the sword and he killed himself. And the man came back to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "I swear by the one who sent you with the truth, indeed he is from the people of the hellfire." So there were instances where this happened, even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Fast forward to our time today, Dr. Brock, I want you to kind of tackle this, is when if a Muslim comes to you, I mean, any one of us, this can happen to any one of us. Is there anyone, and I want you guys just to be honest with me, is there anyone who has ever been confronted with a situation where Muslims has said to you, "I'm thinking about killing myself"? Has anyone ever experienced that? A few hands go up. What should be the appropriate response from a clinical perspective as well as from a religious perspective if someone comes to you and says, "I'm thinking about killing myself"? How do we respond to something like that? And this is appropriate even for imams. Imam, you might be in your office and a Muslim might come to you and say, "Imam, I'm thinking about killing myself." Should we call the police? Should we call, psychiatric ward? Like, should we contact the parents? Like, what should be the appropriate response from a clinical perspective and then from a religious perspective?
Okay, that's a very complicated issue. It's very, very tough. The one thing I can say immediately, first off, is you want to listen to the person, right? Almost all Muslims know that suicide is haram, right? So starting off with it's haram is not helpful. Starting off with Allah doesn't test you with more. You know what I mean? Like, though, alhamdulillah, we come from the best of intentions in doing that, but sometimes what's really most important is listening to a person, because if someone's suicidal, it's really because they feel like there's no solution to whatever it is that they're going through. And so you want to talk to them about that.
Okay.
Right? Talk to me about what has gotten you to this point. Right? Talk to me about your frustrations and your heartaches, so that at least they know that somebody's listening and trying to understand. Because sometimes, you know, you can ask people, is it that you want to be dead, or do you want the pain to go away?
Good
You know, do you
point.
want your suffering to
Good
end,
point.
or do you want to end your life? And those are two really, really important distinctions. Sometimes people will say, no, I myself want to be dead, right? And you want to ask them, well, what would that solve? You know, and try to help them. I mean, think of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the man came to him wanting to make zina permissible. He didn't just say, oh, it's haram. He actually walked him through to help this person understand, right, why he himself should choose not to do it. And when you're doing that, you want to really listen to someone, right? And then you want to talk to them about in what ways can you help. And is listening enough, or can you get them connected to someone? Alhamdulillah, I'm here. You know, inshallah, I always give out my phone number when I comes to that. If you're ever confronted with this issue, someone can say, I know someone you can talk to. You know, I think that would be the best thing. Before you get into, well, am I going to call the police, or am I going to do this, or am I going to do that? I think reaching out to someone who knows better than you, of course, this is from the Qur'an and this is from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that this is the first thing that you want to do.
Well, I know from a clinical perspective, as I used to work as a clinical counselor, we were taught to kind of like isolate them, you know, so they don't hurt themselves or hurt someone else, and just stay with them and be with them in that moment. Be with them, and not to say, oh, inshallah. And as Muslims, we need to get out of that habit of just giving people the cliche advice. Just be patient, inshallah, you'll get over it.
And so, and this is you know, I mean, I understand what I said earlier, not for it to be misconstrued about the fact that, you know, there is no intellectualization. I think that there's not a balance. I think that we try to approach too much intellectually and we forget the emotion, right? Just to be clear. And so I think that leaves us again at another disadvantage as Muslims, is because we don't spend enough time exercising our emotions.
I agree.
So that when we feel them, they're so foreign to us.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like another language. It's something going on within our bodies that we're so unfamiliar with, and that we really need to spend time like allowing ourselves to be. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a very emotional man. He was a very emotional man, and no one, we would, I hope not, inshallah, never call him weak. And so for the same things, when we look at his sunnah, we look at his sunnah for how he prayed, we look at his sunnah for how he got married, we look at his sunnah for how he ate, but we don't look at his sunnah for how he expressed his emotions.
Which was actually my khutbah today.
Alhamdulillah.
And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was sitting at the bedside of his son, Ibrahim, who was fi siyaqat al-maut. He was taking his last breaths of life, taking his last breaths. Yajudu bi nafsi, you know, trembling that very moment before the soul exits the body, trembling, shaking. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sitting there looking at his son. Ibrahim was only 16 months old, 16 months. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam began to cry. We're talking about a grown man, tears coming out of his eyes. And his companion, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, turned to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, tabki wa tanhana anil buka? O Messenger of Allah, are you crying and you tell us not to cry? He said, Ya Abdurrahman, innaha rahmah. He said, Abdurrahman, it's mercy. Because to feel anything in situations like that is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about the society that we live in where we see murder every day and we feel nothing. We feel nothing. We see murder on TV. We see murder in video games. Our children play video games that have murder on it. We hear murder in the music that we listen to. We hear murder. We're desensitized and we feel nothing. Think about how many janazas we go to. Think about the haram in Mecca and Medina. How many of you have made Hajj and Umrah and they pray janazah like almost after every salah? As-salatu ala al-mayyiti yarhamukumullah. You hear that all the time, right? After every salah. Think about janazah after janazah. People don't even sit and wait for the janazah. They're rushing, breaking the rank, cutting through the salat, trying to get out the masjid while people praying the janazah. They feel nothing. So he said, Abdurrahman is mercy, it's rahmah, that I feel anything. He said, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ لَتَدْمَعْ وَالْقَلْبُ يَحْزَنْ وَاللِّسَانُ لَا تَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يُرْدِ اللَّهِ. He said, Abdurrahman, the eyes water, we cry, we feel pain, and the heart feels grief, but the tongue will only say what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The point that I'm making is that he had to explain, Abdurrahman, looking at him as the messenger of Allah, like you're not supposed to cry. This robotic, like he's just a prophet to deliver a message, and emotions have no part of his makeup. No, we're human beings. We have emotions, we have feelings. And to tell somebody, just be patient, you'll get over it, or don't you believe in the qadr? It's as if you feel pain or you feel grief or you're grieving, then that is somehow, some way associated with not believing in the qadr. And we have to stop doing that to one another. Let people be human. They're human beings. They have feelings. We're just using the Qur'an and the Sunnah to help us navigate through these feelings so it doesn't put us at odds with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And my last topic, or the last issue that I want to talk about on this topic is, let's be solution oriented. What are some of the solutions that we can utilize as Muslims to help us avoid stressful situations or situations that bring about anxiety? What are some of the solutions? We're talking to young Muslims here. This show, the Mardiyah Show, is designed for young Muslims between the ages of 18 and 34, okay? Who, many of them are in the college realm, they're in academia, and they have debts which bring about anxiety, fear. They have, the fear of failure. Your parents have spent all this money for you to go to college, so there's like this shoulder, this mountain of responsibility on your shoulder, and you can't fail your parents because they've worked so hard to put you through college. There's so much on the shoulders of young Muslims today. Stay away from zina. The Muslim community is watching you. You know what I mean? Like you can't commit zina. You can't come home with any babies. You can't, father any children outside of wedlock. There's a lot of responsibility on the shoulder of the young Muslims today. And what are some of the solutions to assist them or help them deal with some of these feelings of stress and anxiety?
Well, I think, Akhi Shadid, it's really important that we understand the time that we're living in from the statements that were told to us by the Prophet. We're living in some very difficult times.
Absolutely.
He informed us, like Anas ibn Malik said, ما من عام إلا والذي بعده شر منه حتى تلقوا ربكم. There's no year except that the year that comes after it is worse than the one that preceded it until you meet your Lord. So right now, as we sit right here, the worst time known to Bani Adam is 2014, 1,436 years after the Hijrah today. He told his companions, there's going to come a time when people are going to be killing each other, and a man who was killed doesn't know why was he killed. And the one who killed him doesn't know why did he kill him. The companion said, Ya Rasulullah, wa hal ma'an nas aquluhum yawma idhin. Will the people have the intellect that day? How is a person going to kill someone like that? So it goes to show that the mind is going to be affected during this time. When Yawm al-Qiyamah is established, no one on the earth will say, Allah, Allah. So these are some of the challenges that our children, our young people are dealing with. Solutions. What's the solution? He can't be allowed to go that journey alone. Father can't be disconnected to his child. Mother can't be disconnected from that child. What's going on in the everyday life of that child, in the mind of that child? That child has to be put in a position where the religion is more important than everything. Because unlike Christians and Jews, Sikhs and Hindus, their religion is an ibadah. It consists of some do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. Rituals here, rituals there. Celebration here, celebration there. That's not what the deen is to the Muslim. The deen to the Muslim is the way he sits here, where he sits, where she sits. The religion is what he wears, what he doesn't wear. He can't even wear certain colors, socks. His religion is everything in his life. قُلْ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةِ وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. His whole life, death is the religion. So that child has to be exposed to religious instruction. And I'm not talking about religious instruction where you're just going to take the Qur'an and the Sunnah and you're going to bombard him with ideas of the Qur'an and the Sunnah. I mean, there has to be a redo of the whole approach of the way we're comprehending our religion and we're practicing the religion. So I say in terms of solutions, though every parent has a responsibility to his child more than anyone else to be inside of the mindset of the child. What's going on in the world of the child? And just to finish here, because of the lifestyle that I had before Al-Islam, I always tell my children, especially my sons, you guys can't run no games on me. I know all the tricks. Not only have I been around the block, but I own the block. That's what I told my kids. But I came to realize there's a generation gap between me and my children.
Absolutely.
There is a generation gap.
Absolutely.
And I'm a person who knew what time it was. Literally, I know what time it is now, and I knew what time it was before. But the situation is, social media, the peer pressure, what they're up to, if the parent is not inside of the life, the mind, the everyday living of that child, then there are going to be some problems. So I would say, first and foremost, mother and the father has to take responsibility to expose that child to the Islamic teachings. And Allah knows best.
Tayyib. Dr. Brock, same question.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, first thing. Emotional distress, you know, a lot of it, when you boil it down, comes from one of two things. Number one, you're trying to control the things you cannot control, right? You're trying to control the things you cannot control, and you won't stop trying to control it.
Wow.
Right? Number two, you're failing to control the things you can control.
Wow.
Right? And so you're probably failing to control the things you can control because you're so focused on trying to control the things you can't.
Wow.
Right? And so they feed off of one another. And the prime example of this is that we say we believe in Allah and that Allah is in control of all of the things that go on in our lives, but we don't accept His decree when something happens. We don't accept His decree when a hardship comes into our lives. And so that's really the first place that you want to start, right? Even though things in my life are very difficult right now, what are the parts of my life that I do have control over, that I can exercise control over to help me feel better? What are the things in my life that I cannot control that I need to back away from trying to control so much because it's only causing me more emotional frustration, right? And leave it to Allah because Allah has it for you. And this is, again, where we have to have trust in Allah. The second thing that I would say, inshallah, is really surround yourself with better people. The younger Muslims, alhamdulillah, I think they're surrounded, you know, looking out at the audience, one thing we have to recognize is that your children are Americans, right? And they live in American society. They're affected by American culture. You can't get away from that. Right? And so your children are probably exposed to a lot of people that you wouldn't want them around, and your children are probably the people that the other children's parents don't want them around. Right? When you really think about it, like, oh, I don't want my kid around that kid. Well, that kid's mom doesn't want her kid around your kid either. Right? And when you think about it, and so because a lot of us are up to no good, and as Muslim children, we keep each other's secrets. Right? Because we're all doing wrong and we're all going to kind of like keep it as our dirty secret. But you really got to look, and this is the second point I'm trying to make, you have to really start to pay attention to the consequences of what you do. And then looking at the consequences of what you do, what is the benefit in protecting yourself? Right? Really, what is the benefit in protecting yourself? What's the benefit in doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to do? And it can be very hard to connect yourself with Allah's pleasure. But look at the real world consequences if you really have any trouble believing in Allah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He makes it very concrete for us. He says, look at your own selves, right? Look at the food that you eat. He says, look at so many different things in His creation to understand that He exists. And the one thing that you need to be paying attention to is the consequences of your actions. Look how the consequences of the wrong that you do is evidence, is an example of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. And look at the consequences of the good that you do and how that is similarly an example, right? And you got to think, what do you want for yourself, right? What do you want for yourself? Because we have to want something and we have to live with purpose. This is one of the main things that a lot of young people struggle with, is they have no purpose. They're living for nothing.
Wow.
Right? They're striving, but they're striving to no end in particular, right? They're in college or they're in high school, but they're really just kind of working to work, and they don't really have a purpose. And again, it's not connected to anything, not even just Allah, right? And so you want to be living for a reason, alhamdulillah. Last thing I'm going to say, right? The last thing I'm going to say, in order to succeed, you must struggle.
Wow.
You must suffer.
MashaAllah.
And this is one of the biggest things, and not just the young people, but all of us struggle with. Our love for Allah is so conditional, right? Our love for Allah is so conditional. We love Allah when He's benefiting us, when He's blessing us with the things that we think are blessings. And the moment that Allah tests us, this is when we really struggle with Allah, right? Because His love for us is unconditional. Our love for Him is conditional. Right, well, we got to think about it. The road to Jannah is paved with, is decorated with hardships.
Absolutely.
And we forget this. Yes, inshallah, you will be successful, and yes, you will enjoy that success, but don't forget that along that path, you're going to struggle some, right? And it's equally as necessary, and don't forget Jannah in your struggles, right? This is the reminder. This is the thing that you use to stable yourself emotionally, when whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees for you begins to hurt you emotionally.
And subhanAllah, very powerful, powerful words. And I'll end with this, and that is that sometimes the same situations that we make dua for Allah to get us out of are the same situations that Allah put us in to help us correct the things about ourselves we needed to correct. The problems that you experience in life are a reflection of the problems that you have within yourself that you need to fix. So while we're making dua, oh Allah, make this situation easy for me. Oh Allah, get me out of this situation. Allahumma inni bima anzalta ilayya la faqir. As Musa made dua, oh Allah, whatever you have sent down, whatever you have decreed for me, I'm in need of it right now, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withholds those things from you because there's something that you need to go through so that you can become a better you after the situation is over with. I mean, like, is that clear? Like, stop trying to get out of the situation. Maybe you need to go through this so that you can become a better you after it's over with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the story of Khidr and Musa, right? And when Khidr could no longer take Musa, constantly questioning him about what he was doing, right? And sometimes we need to do the same thing. We make decisions in our lives, and then people are constantly asking us, why are you doing this? Why you listen to him? Why you go to this masjid? And sometimes you need to say, هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. This is where we go our separate ways. Because I'm making decisions in my life that you don't understand, and I got to constantly come back and explain it to you. I'm tired of doing that. It's easier for me to just separate myself from you and go my separate way. The Prophet ﷺ said, Layta Musa sabara. If Musa had only been more patient, we could have gotten more benefit out of that story. So what I'm saying is sometimes we need to go through what we need to go through in our lives and in our situations so that we can gain the maximum benefit out of the trials and tribulations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us with. And with that, inshallah ta'ala, I would like to thank my guests for coming on and contributing, much of what we needed to, put the pieces of this puzzle together with this situation of stress and anxiety and suicide and all of these things that we are suffering from today. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place it in your scales of good, Yawm al-Qiyamah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us ease during our times of difficulty. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make whatever difficulty we go through as a kifaya, as a kafara, as an expiation for our sins. For in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala waliyu dhalika wa qadirun ala kulli shay. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Supposed to be places, sanctuaries, places where the blood and the honor and the dignity of Muslims are sacred. You shouldn't walk into a masjid and have to fear for your life. You shouldn't have to walk into a masjid and be in fear that your character is going to be assassinated. You shouldn't have to walk into a masjid and to leave out feeling like you are less than the Muslim you thought you were. The masjid should be a place of mercy.